This video is sponsored by Superman64.
Mr. Strickland, I hate you!
Hello there. So, recently I reviewed Propane Boom Part 1, which put Hank in the tough position of getting fired from Strickland Propane because Buck couldn't compete with their amazing prices. The company was downsized, which left Hank holding the bag and forced him to seek employment at the Megalomart, which was a storyline that had good stuff, good drama, and an even better explosion.
A massive explosion! Oh! Is it down and out? Take it down on the word go!
And this shifting of jobs, combined with the presence of Debbie Grund, got me thinking, deep thinking, to the point where I wanted to make this quick video essay about one of the other big two-parter episodes, namely Hanky Panky and High Anxiety. Specifically, I wanted to talk about how the second part of that mystery concludes, where Buck reveals that he's been framing Hank for the murder of the angelic Debbie Grund.
Then it was Buck.
It wasn't me. It was Hank. Didn't you get the tape? What about that Hank name tag I put in the bushes?
Buck did this because he thought his wife, the soup mistress herself, Ms. Liz, killed Debbie, who was Buck's mistress and my oh-so-toxic dream girl. But putting that snack queen aside, in order to keep Ms. Liz and her hot toddies out of jail, Buck chose to frame Hank for the tank wife's murder. He didn't just do so to misdirect the cops' attention away from Miss Liz, but to get Hank incarcerated for first-degree murder, which Texas calls capital murder, in which the defendant, quote, intentionally and knowingly causes the death of another person, unquote. To bring about such a conviction, Buck manipulates Hank into a confession that could be taken as a motivation for wanting Debbie out of the picture.
Yes.
Louder!
Yes, I was angry. Debbie threatened to tell my wife that we had sexual relations.
Okay, Hank. I got all I need.
In a very Johan-like move, he also plants a shotgun shell in Hank's truck and delivers the confession tape to the police in an envelope that reads, "Search Hank's truck." And this really isn't a small thing he's doing here. The man is going the distance. He is plotting, he is planning, and he is even willing to make an orphan out of Bobby Hill.
They do have a mother, champ.
Yes, but I would imagine that she would die of grief.
Because as Dale points out in the Smoking and the Bandit episode, Texas does have the death penalty and they are not afraid to use it, a fact that the sheriff even jokes about.
Well, those technicalities have a name, Bobby. They're called the Bill of Rights.
Oh, he's got a right. He's got a right arm for them to stick the needle in.
So when it is eventually revealed that Debbie accidentally filled her own belly with a different kind of buckshot than she's used to, Buck makes a quick apology and Hank surprisingly accepts it with the greatest of ease.
No. Sorry about that whole frame up there, Tano. I was under a lot of stress.
Yeah, I guess if my mistress had been murdered and my wife were a suspect, yeah.
But I would like to propose to you today an alternative ending to this episode. I submit to you that instead of Hank moving past Buck's attempt to put him on death row, I think it would have made for an excellent and dramatic shift in the show if Hank had decided to leave Strickland Propane over this incident. We have already seen Hank willing to do so over much less extreme circumstances, namely when Strickland forced Hank to work at Kahn's car wash.
How come you working for me?
Not anymore, I'm not.
Hank, you know this car wash is part of the Strickland family. You quit it, you're quitting Strickland.
If you say so, sir. Yeah.
Now you may be saying to yourself, reviewed to death, mi querido. A huge part of the show is Hank's relation to Propane. We can't get rid of it because that's one of the core jokes of his character, you fool.
Are you prepared for the kind of death you've earned, little man?
And I agree. I completely agree with you, my friend. I am not suggesting in any way that he leave permanently, but instead I think that this two-parter mystery episode comes at the perfect time in the show for a temporary departure from Strickland Propane. At this point in the show's run, Season 4, Hank has already taken 3 minor leaves of absence from the Propane game. The first such incident happened in Snow Job, where he had a crisis over an electric stove in Mr. Strickland's house, which led Hank to being disillusioned by Buck's philosophy around God's gas.
It's a higher calling.
Oh, hell, Hank, it's just a business. It's about making as much money as you can while you can.
The second, of course, came when the Megalomart killed Hank's branch of Strickland Propane, which really doesn't say much for Hank's level of, job security now, does it? And finally, in the masterfully well done episode Little Horrors of Shop, Hank was forced to take time off and he began working as a substitute teacher, which is an experiment that the fandom, and I include myself in that number, tends to look back on with great affection.
Okay, Joseph. Well, I don't see any reason your father needs to find out about this.
This is all to say that his career of selling propane has already been shown to be, somewhat tenuous to say the least. We haven't quite reached the total Flanderization of Hank's commitment to propane, body and soul, as would come to be the case in the post-season 6 episodes. And if he was willing to walk away over an electric grill, it would make perfect sense that he would take a somewhat longer stay away after Buck tried to frame him for literal murder. Plus, if we look forward, there are really only 2 episodes in Season 4 and 5 where Strickland Propane plays a significant role in the plot, those being the Propaniacs and the Buck Stops Here. The Propaniacs, also doesn't happen for another 6 episodes after High Anxiety, so there was definitely time to do 1 or 2 episodes away from Strickland. Better still, if Hank doesn't forgive Buck, then there's no real incentive for him to transfer legal ownership of Sugarfoots back to his old boss, meaning that Hank already has a stable form of income right at his fingertips, and he doesn't have to spend an entire episode looking for a job, as it's built right into the conclusion of the Debbie Grund murder mystery. Now, I really want you to take a second here and consider, just try to picture this, the hilarious, dynamic, and groan-inducing potential of seeing Hank and Peggy try to run this business together. I mean, come on, if we combined Hank's knowledge and down-home charm with Peggy's drive and self-centered mindset, perhaps even bringing Bobby or Luann in on it too, like... Goddamn, son, now that would have been some fucking good television, boy.
Come on. Show Peggy Sugarfoots in the background. Show Peggy Sugarfoots in the background. Show Peggy Sugarfoot. Yes!
But the show had also set up the idea of Hank running a general store, which could potentially have happened after Peggy inevitably ran Sugarfoots into the ground and they needed to change up the format of their business. Perhaps then, with Peggy wallowing in the shame of killing Sugarfoots, we could have seen Hank struggle to run his general store, showcasing the amusing ways that he fails to connect with his customers, or showing us the flaws in his business plan, or whatever. And you know what, if he has a general store, then that could still bring in the subject of propane into his daily life. Maybe he could even reflect on it, oh, it's nice selling propane here, but I do miss the whole game over at Strickland. You know, it could hint that he may go back. But my point is, with the Sugarfoots operation failing and Hank desperately in need of some income, maybe then he could have returned to Buck and offered to give him back Sugarfoots as a peace offering, and then they could have put the whole mess behind them. Alternatively, the episode The Buck Stops Here could have been made all the more intense if Bobby had bonded with Buck while Hank wasn't working for him and there was still a lot of tension and bad blood between the two men. That really would have made Buck's favoritism and mentoring of Bobby sting all the more, eh? And in this hypothetical episode, I could see a world in which Buck, despite putting Bobby in danger initially, manages to save the boy in a selfless way that manages to impress Hank, rebuilds their bridges, and gets Hank back to his old job. Which, yes, admittedly, would have the unfortunate side effect of taking away this very satisfying moment.
Yeah! Come and get me, you son-of-a-bitches! Hey, come on, step on it, go!
Oh, but I also just remembered, in the episode Ho Yeah, Hank introduces Tammy Duval to the guys on his propane route, but she also could have served as the hostess of Peggy Sugarfoots, which, if we'll remember what Buck said, was built right next to the Singles complex.
You know, Debbie's place is right next to Sugarfoots. That's a coincidence.
No coincidence. I like to eat, I like to hump, and I don't like to drive.
God, what a man of the people. You gotta respect someone who knows what he wants, even if it's kinda gross. But no, really, okay, so let's think about this here. Let's get that whole mental image out of our head and think about this. Imagine a bunch of Tammy's customers all coming across the street from the Singles complex and filling up Sugarfoots. There could have been like this great scene of Hank coming in and going oh my gosh, looks like we're really busy today, or oh, that get up and go attitude, that sign I put up is really drawing in all the customers, my goodness. Or Tammy, you're such a good employee that they're all coming to see you. I guess who wouldn't? Or whatever. It could have been really funny. It could have made Hank's unintentional pimping situation look all the more impressive to Alabaster, and just could have been a really funny situation.
Pretty sweet little operation you got going on for a small town player.
I am proposing this fan fiction-esque scenario because it has always really bothered me how Hank just lets the Debbie accusation go, especially when you contrast it against the Dr. Quarters thing or the stupid fucking stove. And don't get it twisted, I completely understand that the joke at the end of the murder mystery is that Hank is so subservient to Mr. Strickland that he's willing to suppress any negative feelings he may have for the man, but when that joke comes after an entire episode of Buck acting like a fucking psychopath, I think the writers were just asking a little too much from the audience.
And, like he said, we were smoking pot.
Who are you, Hank Hill?
It just removes so much of Hank's agency and strips him of his usually take-no-shit personality. So yes, I think the ending of High Anxiety could have brought even more changes to Season 4, which is already a really bold set of episodes that made a number of very exciting changes. Remember, this is the season that got Luann out of the Hill House, broke Nancy and John Redcorn up, greatly expanded upon Bill's background, gave Connie her first period, and even created a very sweet bond between Peggy and Cotton of all people, even if that one didn't last.
Why won't you die?
This was supposed to happen to you. You're worthless.
Cotton, may I have this dance? Ooh.
You're worthless.
What I'm trying to say here is that this was a time of great change for the show where the familiar was taken away and characters were brought into wildly different situations. And I feel like I should reiterate here, between this point in Season 4 and the end of Season 5, there are 30 episodes total, only one of which absolutely needs Hank to be working at Strickland Propane for it to sort of like function well, since the buck stops here isn't fully dependent on it, since, Hank doesn't have to be working for Mr. Strickland for Bobby to be his caddy, which only leaves the Propaniacs as the main episode affected by my insane proposal. There is also the opening of Nancy's Boys, where Hank saves the owner of That's Amore from the freezer because he was checking the propane tank, but if Hank were running a restaurant, and especially if he were running a general store, there are ways to get him to save this guy instead of just having him be working for Strickland, such as getting him to go over to check the tanks in an unofficial capacity, or as one restaurant manager meeting another for a collaboration, or to discuss some similar trade concerns, or whatever. In general though, going with my hypothetical really wouldn't have changed the trajectory of the show, especially if they had quickly brought Hank back into the fold and gotten him back at Strickland. Perhaps they could even use that reconnecting moment as a satisfying way to end Season 4, instead of the, let's call it, difficult to watch exhibition of embarrassment and gaslighting that is Peggy's fanfare.
I had very big feet, and when other kids would make fun of me, my grandma told me to tell them, this is just the way God made me.
And when the other kids would make fun of me, you see, my dad, who I might add was a substitute school teacher, told me, you tell them, this is just the way God made me.
I will still never understand how the writers convinced Randy Travis to go along with such a shitheel portrayal of himself. Woo! The man either must have an ironclad ego that can survive anything, or he had such an intense love of the show that he was just able to laugh along with them. It's just... whew, it is quite the intense, character assassination in a way. Woo-hoo. But that is a subject for another day. I wanted to put out this strange little theoretical essay because it felt a little too large to fit into the actual episode review, which I can already tell is going to be long enough as it is. But what do you think? Does this idea have any sort of meaningful potential, or would this have been a really poor decision for the showrunners to make? This is actually your chance to act as the critic this time. Review my proposal to death, and let me know, boss, what you thinking. Oh, and please let me know if you enjoyed this format, but especially let me know if you did not and would instead prefer that I stick purely to my reviews and stay away from the occasional musing, what if, or theory discussing video. I really do listen to your feedback, and I take your thoughts into account when selecting the content that I decide to make. In any case, thank you for sampling this hot take, and I hope you didn't get burned. Oh, and sorry for kind of sounding like I'm a little under the weather here. I'm really not. It's just my voice is a little sort of gruffer than normal, which I wasn't going to record, but I'm like, this is kind of a rare opportunity. I'm never sick like this, so here you go. In any case, have a wonderful day, and I'll see you in the next review? Video? Well, I'll see you soon.
What the... Mr. Strickland?
Well, well. Now, soup is good food, Hank, but keep your spoon in your own bowl.
What was that?